So we have a still life here in front of us that has some boxes in it. So we're going to talk about how to deal with objects that fall into 1 and 2 point perspective. I also want to talk about your eye level again. And so the first thing that you can do when you have a bunch of boxes is you want to designate which sort of perspective problem they are. So I want to point out, remember, 1 point perspective is when the front plane faces you. So this box is 1 point perspective. 2 point perspective is when one corner is closer to you than any of the others. So there's 2 point and 2 point. Now, it's worth pointing out, watch the angles going back in space. They're different, right? These two boxes do not share points. They have their own vanishing points. These guys are cylinders, so they don't have vanishing points. If they did have one, it would be right straight behind them. The box that these things are in is also 1 point perspective. I lined it up with this guy. But I want to go over how to find your eye level again, and I want to illustrate it a little bit better. So bear with me while this gets a little bit rough. But if we raise the camera, even a little bit, see how we can start to see the top of the box here. This was straight across, and now this is at an angle, and you can see the light hitting the top of the box. So that's equivalent to us like standing up or raising our eye level. Now if we slowly crank this thing back down, watch what happens to the angle at the top on the left there. It just slowly gets to a point where it flattens out. And that tells us that our eye level is right there. Now in terms of measuring, I also brought this white bottle in, because if we can plot the location of the white bottle, go up 1, we land right on our eye level. So I'm going to go and draw this from a slightly different eye level because I'm taller than the camera, and from a slightly different angle in the room. So some of these things I just told you are true from the angle of this camera, but maybe not when I go to draw it. So the drawing is going to look a little bit different than this. It wouldn't be any fun if it looked just like this, because then you wouldn't be able to tell I did it from life. But the other thing I wanted to show you is what a lot of people have trouble with is picking their angles. And a really easy thing to do is to take your pencil. Like let's say you're drawing this box here, and you've plotted where the front corner goes. And so it's good to start with the bottom angle because they're usually a little easier. And all you do is hold your pencil up to there, and then without changing the angle, you move it over to your drawing. And you know that you already have this point plotted, so you just draw that angle on there. And it's usually maybe not 100% right, but it's going to be very close. And you can do that throughout the whole thing. But where people have the most trouble is in their drawing not allowing, like this line going back and this line going back, those two lines, if you follow them all the way out, they converge on the horizon way over on the right. And then the same thing with I lost my pencil there. With this one and this one and this one, all three of these lines converge even further away than these. This one, these two lines, they converge straight up right here. So that's the reason why I have that on there, because it's really easy to see that. But when people make mistakes in their boxes, it's because they don't allow the lines that go back in space to consistently recede. They'll have one doing this, which might be right, and then they'll have the other one doing this, which is definitely wrong. They have to converge. And I know it's a really subtle thing, but it's there. You have to be able to observe it because it's true. And one of the things we do when we're drawing is we try to accumulate as many true things as we can. And when all those things work together, you get a drawing that's convincing to the viewer. Because ultimately, that's really what we're trying to do. A drawing is an inherently unbelievable context because a person made it. The viewer is unlikely to believe what you've done. So you have to go the extra mile to make sure that everything that you've done is believable. So I'm going to move over to draw some of this and go over some of the same stuff as I draw. All right, so off camera, as I was doing some measuring, and what I did was I changed my angle. So the 1 point perspective block is now the block in the middle from the last segment. And so I blocked in, because it's 1 point perspective, I blocked in the front plane of the object, and I'm just going to work that back to the horizon. But from here, I have to figure out where my horizon is because I'm taller than the camera. So when I look at the big white box, I'm actually looking over it. So I've included a photo that probably is coming up on the screen now of what the view looks like for me, and I put a piece of tape or a piece of paper on the wall. The top of that paper is my eye level. So it turns out that the top of the bottle and this point here, if I take this and go up one, I'm at my horizon is going to be up here. So what I did was I figured that out, and then I measured how many of the front planes will fit in here, and I worked out this size. So now, thinking about this box, it's 1 point perspective. If I lean to the left slightly, I can see that left-hand side. So that tells me that the vanishing point for the 1 point perspective box here is just straight up. So I can draw that vertical all the way up. And it may not be vertical to you guys because I have to shoot at an angle. But the second angle here, all I have to do is, well, there's two things I can do. I can think about this and how high this goes. Where is my horizon? And I just take this angle and tilt it in. It's probably going to be something like that. And just because I have this and this line and I know where my horizon is, I shouldn't even have to look to know this angle. But if I do have to look, all I have to do is hold my pencil out, put it right on that angle, just like I did before, and hold it there, and look, I get pretty much the same angle. So now I can just carry that up. And see how they converge as they go up? That's good. Now I need to figure out how much of the top. So I measure the top, like 1, and then how many tops will fit in the front. 1, a little more than 2. Or was it a little less than 2? It was a little less than 2. So 2 got me to here. So if I go halfway between those two, that's how I get my top. All right, 1 point perspective. So now what I want to do is move over to some of the other objects. So I can measure up 1, a little bit. Raise that up a little bit. Okay. I have a cylinder behind this box, so I just want to make sure I know how tall it is, and how wide it is, and where it intersects with the box. There. top of the cylinder. It's right here. How many of the, now I'm measuring the ellipse, how many of the ellipses vertically will fit inside the box here? One, let's see, it's about like that. So when I go to do the ellipse down here, it's going to have to be fuller than this one. And it's frustrating because you can't see it, but here we go. Very lightly. But because I worked out its height and its width and everything, all I need is time to work this out. Negotiate those curves. In order to get a better angle, I have to stand in front of the camera here. So excuse me for a minute. All right, so that's not the best ellipse I've ever drawn, but you get the right idea. So that's enough detail for now, because I'm just trying to figure out how it goes. Now, since I can't see the bottom ellipse all the way through, I have to know that it's bigger than that, right? So if that's where the ellipse would be if they were equal, I'm just going to make it a little bit higher, and then I'll pull this box out. I'm drawing the ellipse all the way through, and then I'll just strengthen the front. And even though I can't see it, doesn't matter. If I know where it is, ellipses all look the same. So all I have to do is just get it right. Make sure it looks like a good oval. And then I can strengthen the front. And let it go through. Nice and round. And I can strengthen the box here. Our one-point perspective box is safe. So the next thing I'm going to do is try and plot over to this box over here. So if I draw that line that way, I can hold my pencil out and see what part of the box it runs into. I can also measure this over 1, and I believe it's 1 to 1. Yeah? So measure that over. But finding the right-hand side of the box isn't good enough. I need to find the front corner, because that's where I'm going to draw everything from. So right there. So the top of the front corner is right there. It's a little bit higher than this. And then I just measure down and compare that height to something else. It should be a little taller, because I know this block is the same as this one. So it should land about there. So that's my front corner for this box. And now all I do is just, I know that that's the width there. From the front corner, I just pick my angles. Hold it up, put it on there. It's kind of a high angle. If I follow the pencil and see where it leads, it runs through here, it's high. It hits that box, it keeps going. I can do this one, go in the same place. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the other angle first. I know it's a little bit out of order, but let's see. Okay, because we have this angle, and that comes in now. See how these two are converging? That's the idea. Now I know that I'm kind of dubious about this space here. I don't think that that's right. So I want to, before I get too much further, I want to fix it. All right, so let's move that over a little bit. Still good. So this comes up a little bit. Now, if this is right, take that angle. Now, one thing that people are going to make a lot of mistakes with is when you're doing two-point perspective, it's important to remember that there are no horizontals in two-point perspective. All the angles have to angle up. And so this one is kind of a low angle, and maybe it needs to angle slightly higher. And I'll double, once I get it on here, then I can reverse it. Yeah, it's a little bit low. So it needs to angle up slightly higher. So something more like that. That's going to be better. And when I go to do this angle, all I have to do is make sure that it leaves the page in between these two. I don't have to look. Make sure that that gets done right. And that's one of the cool things about perspective is when you get one or two important things right, everything else just falls into place. Now I just have to measure to the left for that left plane. How big is it? Well, that can't be right. Hang on. Okay, so it's going over like this. And now this angle, see how this distance is a little bit smaller than that one? Same thing here. It's a little bit bigger. From here, I can take the angle, or I can just draw it back to the same point. I should get the same result. Went a little high. Okay. So from here, if I want to go and do the other box on this side, I just need to measure over, find its front corner. That's the front corner. I hold it, my pencil out horizontal, find where the bottom lines up with this. So there's my bottom corner. I have to, well, you'll see in a second. In the interest of time, I'm speeding the rest of this up. What I'm doing with this box is I'm trying to build the box in its totality and then shave off that front angle. And you'll see that as I go. As I build the box, I make it too wide. So for some reason I have a hard time seeing it, but I do catch it and I come back to it at the end. I work out some slightly more complicated things on the table. There's a couple of letters on the table and I'm going to work those out right now. We'll talk more about how to do that, but you can just watch it. It's pretty self-explanatory. I draw them, instead of drawing them like a box, I draw them like a footprint and then build them up and then carve the inside out. But hopefully this video helps you. I know it's really long, but I wanted to keep the talking going because I thought the content was pretty good here. So hopefully it helps.